Hello students, hope you all are fine and good in health. Today we are going to study the lesson on the pasture written by Johanna Spyri. Children, have you gone to pasture? What do you mean by a pasture? Pasture is a beautiful field which usually animals graze. Domestic animals like cow, goats, etc. will graze on a beautiful field that is called a pasture. So here we are going to study a lesson called On the Pasture written by the writer, very famous writer Johanna Spyri. So let us see more about the writer. Johanna Spyri was born on June 12, 1827 in Switzerland. And her first story is A Leaf on Ronnie's Grave. Then she has wrote stories in German language. She has written lots and lots of books for children, and the most famous work is the Heidi. And she used the money which she got selling the books for helping the orphans. So whatever she writes, she sells that books, and the money was used for helping orphans. So now it's time to move to the lesson Heidi. You all should read the book Heidi, children. It's a very interesting book. It's a classic of English literature, and this story is about a girl, an orphan. She is an orphan. She lost her parents when she was very young, and she was taken care by her aunt. And after a long time, aunt is putting this Heidi back to her grandfather's house, and she is enjoying each and every moment there. She got friendship. She was in a good friendship with a boy called Peter. Peter was a shepherd boy. So there they enjoy each and every moment. So let's go to the text. Please take page number 129. When I read, please see the text and sit. Heidi is a young orphan girl who comes to live in the Swiss Alps with her grandfather. There, she becomes friends with Peter the goatherd, who takes her up to the alpine pastures where he grazes his goats. Heidi and Peter had been climbing for an hour now. After they reached the high pastures, the boy took off his bag, putting it in a little hollow in the ground. The wind often blew in violent gusts up there, and Peter did not want to lose his precious lot. Then he lay down on the sunny grass, for he was very tired. Heidi too rolled up her apron and rested beside Peter. So children, Heidi, as I said, she was a very young girl who was an orphan. Orphan means those who don't have parents. And they lived in Swiss Alps with her grandfather. So she is living with her grandfather, and she becomes friend with a boy. This Peter is a boy. Grandfather used to keep Peter to help him to graze the goats. So he was basically a shepherd boy. Then one day Peter and Heidi was climbing for an hour. They were just climbing on the hills, and they were taking these goats along with them. And when they reached the high pasture, the boy took off his bag. Peter was carrying a bag, and he took that and put it in the hollow in the ground. Hollow means it's a vacant space. In the ground there was some space, vacant space. So he put the bag there. And what was the wind? Wind was blowing. It's a very gust. Gust means sudden rush of wind. Okay, so the wind was very violent up there, and Peter was holding the bag so tightly. Then he lay down on the grass. As he was very tired, you know, climbing the hill is not an easy task, is it? So he was so tired that he put that bag down, and Heidi was also with him. Heidi rolled up her apron and rested beside Peter. Rolled up means wrapped or folded. She folded her apron and sat near Peter. Suddenly, she heard a loud, sharp scream. As she looked up, she saw the largest bird she had ever seen flying above her. With outspread wings, it flew in large circles over Heidi's head. "Wake up, Peter," Heidi called. "Look up, Peter, and see the eagles there." Peter awoke and then they both watched the bird breathlessly. It rose higher and higher into the azure till it disappeared at last behind the mountain peak. So what happened? Suddenly she heard a large cry. What was that? She saw big eagles in the azure. Azure means in the blue sky. And it was flying in large circles over Heidi's head. It was just flying in large circles. So what did she say? She said, "Wake up, Peter, look up and see, what is that?" And Peter, he opened his eyes, he was awoke, and they both watched the bird breathlessly. Why? Because it was a very huge bird. Eagle, is it? It was a very huge eagle and it was flying all around. It rose higher and higher into the azure until it disappeared at last behind the mountain peak. So where was this birds flying? This eagle was flying in the sky and it just disappeared behind a mountain peak. "Where has it gone?" Heidi asked. "Home to its nest," was Peter's answer. "Oh, does it really live up there? How wonderful that must be. But telling me, why does it scream so loud?" Heidi inquired. "Because it has to," remarked Peter. "Oh, let's climb up there and see its nest," implored Heidi. So what happened here? Heidi is asking where the eagle has gone. So Peter said that it went to its nest. So she was a very curious girl, is it? Each and every time she is asking a lot of questions. See, oh, does it really live up there? She is asking, is that eagle living up in such a far place? How wonderful that must be. But tell me, why does it scream so loud? Heidi inquired. So Heidi asked Peter why that bird is making so much noise, why it is crying. "Because it has to," remarked Peter. Peter said that it has to cry, so it cried. He was a very cool person, is it? He just said like that. Because it has to cry, it cried. "Oh, let's climb up there and see its nest." So what the Heidi is telling, let us climb to that top of the mountain and let us see that nest. Implored Heidi. Implored means begged. But Peter disapproved of this and said, "Even the gods could not climb up there. Grandfather has told me not to let you fall down the rocks, so we cannot go." So what happened? Peter said, "You cannot say like that, because I have promised grandfather to take care of you. And if you are doing such troubles, it is not fine." So he said that even the gods could not climb up there. God, God, they usually climb in all the top places, is it? So here this boy is telling, Peter is telling that it is not possible for even gods to climb up. Then how can we human beings climb up in such a big place? And grandfather has told me to take care of you also, so we cannot go. Peter now began to call loudly and to whistle, and soon all the gods were assembled on the green field. Heidi ran into their midst, for she loved to see them leaping and playing about. So what happened? Peter called loudly using a whistle. He just called, and all the gods came back from the green field. This is how in olden days people used to take sheep and cows for grazing. It will be a long place and they let all the cows and goats, then they just go there, they'll eat the grasses and all these things, and by evening the shepherd will give a blow a whistle, and all this sheep and cows will be back. It's a signal for them to come back. It's time to get inside the shed. So here similarly we can see that this Peter blew a whistle and all the gods came back. Heidi ran into their midst, for she loved to see them leaping and playing about. So Heidi loved gods a lot, said. So she stood in the center. Midst here refers to the center. She stood in the middle of all these gods and she loved to see them leaping. Leaping means what? Jumping. jumping and playing about. You know, little gods, they usually jump and play all around. Have you seen a god? If you have seen, it's very visible that they enjoy. They will always run around and play, isn't it? So here she enjoyed standing in the middle of or in the center of all the gods, and they were leaping, jumping and playing about. Peter decided it was time for lunch. As Heidi watched amazed, he milked the gods and filled the bowl he had carried along. He also took out pieces of bread and cheese from the bags that Heidi's grandfather and his mother had packed. When Heidi saw that her slices were larger than his, she generously offered some of her food to Peter. Peter was speechless with surprise. Nodding his thanks to her, he ate the most luxurious meal he had ever had in his life. So Peter decided it was lunch time. So morning they all came up the pasture and they are spending the whole day. So grandfather and Peter's mother had packed some food for them. They said they are coming to the pasture and they are staying there till evening, so they had to eat something. So it was lunch time, and Heidi was amazed to see Peter milking the goats. You see the picture, children? The Peter was milking the goat. So, and he filled that bowl. He had carried along. One bowl was there to take the milk of goat, fresh hot milk. He just milked it, and he also took out pieces of bread and cheese from the bags that Heidi's grandfather and his mother had packed. So they started to drink the milk and also eat bread and cheese. When Heidi saw that her slices were larger than his, she generously offered some of her food to Peter. So here you can see how caring this Heidi is, she was ready to share a big piece of cheese. She understood that her grandfather had packed a big portion of cheese for her, and Peter, he's from a very poor family, so his mother has packed a little one. So when she compared it, she understood that she got a bigger piece of food. So she was ready to share one portion to Peter. Peter was speechless with surprise because Heidi is from a very rich family. So he was actually surprised and speechless because she was such a good girl. Nodding his thanks to her, nodding means shaking the head, nodding his thanks to her, he ate the most luxurious meal he had ever had in his life. So the boy had not eaten such good quality cheese. So he was eating most luxurious meal. Luxurious means fancy and enjoyable, something very expensive. So he is enjoying that food, and he is telling that he is nodding his thanks to her. He is speechless, he cannot say anything. Instead of telling something, he nodded his head to say thank you, and he ate that food which was provided by Heidi.